So now that we know how to create the graphs for quantitative variables, we want to be able to determine some basic statistics related to quantitative variables. And our focus here in lesson 2.3 is primarily on those that deal with the center of the distribution or measures of central tendency. So our targets here in lesson 2.3 are to be able to compute, describe, and compare the 4 measures of central tendency. They are mean, median, mode, and mid-range. We want to understand the effect that outliers have on those measures as well. So the mean is just the average. We've talked about that in class already. And the median, again, we've talked about is just the value of the piece of data that is in the very middle or the average of the 2 very middle data values. So the first thing you do when determining the median by hand is you find the depth of the median, the position of the median, and we'll look at a formula that will help us do that. Once we know the position of the median, then we find the value of that piece of data, and that will be the median value. Mid-range is a third measure of central tendency, and it's just as the name says, it's the middle of the range. So if the range is max minus min, it is the value that is right halfway in between the max and the min, or highest and lowest. And the mode we've mentioned is the one that occurs most frequently. And if 2 different values occur most frequently, we say that the data set does not have a mode. Now, let's kind of create a little round off rule here for these calculations. So when we're rounding an answer, let's agree to keep 1 more decimal place in our answer than was in the original data. So if the original data was in whole numbers, these statistics we're going to report to the nearest 10th, 1 digit after the decimal point. If the data values are to the nearest 10th, then when we calculate these measures, let's round our answer to the nearest 100th, 2 digits after the decimal point, and so on. So up to this point with lessons 2.1 and 2.2, we've just been estimating that median, that center value. Now we're going to calculate it. So let's say that in a college statistics course, your professor bases your grade upon the performance of 3 exams. The average of your first 2 exams is 89%, and on the 3rd exam, you score a 95%. What's your grade in the class? Well, we don't know exactly what grade we got on exams 1 and 2. We just know that when we added them together and divided by 2, we got an 89%. So what we can do is we can just go under the assumption that each of them is 89, because if we use that assumption, 89 plus 89 divided by 2 is 89. You could do it in other ways. You could do 91 plus 87 divided by 2. They have an average of 89 as well. But it's easier just to say, okay, I'm going to assume exam 1 was an 89 and exam 2 was an 89, because if they were, our average for the 2 exams would be 89. So we're going to take 89 plus 95, the 3rd exam score, or 2 times 89 plus 95, and divide that total by 3. So we will have determined that the average or mean score on the exam for this student must have been a 91%. Well, what if I say that the average on your first 3 of 4 tests is an 85, and you want to raise your average for all tests by 2 points? What score must you get on your 4th test in order to do so? Well, obviously you're going to need to score higher than 85, because if your average from 3 tests is 85, you obviously need to get something much higher than that to bring an average of 4 tests up to something higher, 87 in this case. So we know that we're going to add the 85 and the 85 and the 85 to our 4th exam score, which is unknown, so I've just called it X. And then we're going to divide that total by 4, and we want it to equal 87, which is 2 points higher than the current average of 85. And we have to do a little algebra here to solve for X. And to do that, we're going to have to get rid of the division by 4. So the opposite of dividing by 4 is multiplying. So we're going to need to take 87 and multiply it by 4. When we do that, we get 348. So that basically tells us that the total number of points that the student needs to score on all 4 tests must be equal to 348. Well, we already know that we scored an average of 85 on the first 3. So 3 85s added together, or 3 times 85, is 255. So we already have 255 points. We need to figure out the remaining number of points we need to get on the 4th exam. And so we'll take the total number of points necessary, 348, minus the 255. And the student would need to score a 93 on that 4th exam in order to bring the average up to 87. Now you can check that, because if you take 3 times 85 and you add 93, that's a total of 348. If you divide that by 4, because the student will have taken 4 tests, that's an average of 87.